Hey everyone, so in this video I want to take a quick look at KenShape, which just updated to version 1.3 a couple of days ago. If you're not familiar with it, KenShape is an easy to use 3D modeler. It has a built-in 2D paint program. You draw the 2D image and then KenShape automatically will extrude it into a 3D object. At that point, on a block by block basis, you can alter the extrusion level and thereby you can really sculpt and mold your 3D model. In fact, it's that extrusion functionality that got the most attention. So you start KenShape, and the first thing you'll see is there is a new canvas size, 64 by 64. So that's the first major addition. And if you notice, it gives you a little pop-up here letting you know that if you export or save, there might be some slowdown. It might take longer because of that size. So we don't have to use that size for this demonstration. We'll just choose 16. Now, the actual drawing mode, and if you're not familiar, there are 4 modes: drawing, depth, model, and then export. There are 4 modes, and this mode, there have not been any changes that I'm aware of. There's nothing in the notes. I've been messing around with this for a couple hours, attempting to record this, failing again and again and again. So what they did add, though, is that you can now navigate between these 4 modes using the F1 through F4 key. So F1, 2, 3, 4, back to F1. So nice little quality of life type of addition. Okay, so let's just draw a few lines. Doesn't really matter. I just want to show you that new functionality, and we need a few lines in order to do that. And unfortunately, I have some questions because there wasn't, from what I could tell, any documentation about this. The product page does say that these were added, but nothing that I could find explained how it works. Now, I'm not an expert on color theory, so it's very possible someone out there will be like, oh, I understand how this works, so feel free to comment. That way we'll all know. Okay, so just some random colors, really doesn't matter. Just drew some shapes. And what we'll now do is we now go to depth. And again, you can either click on that or you can click F2. And you can see it automatically extrudes out with an extrusion of 1. Now, normally you could either use the pen tool, the line tool, or the paint tool, just like when you're doing the drawing, to change these. And I just want to call something out. I don't know if I mentioned it in the other videos. The paint can doesn't necessarily work the way you would expect it to, because the paint can for color usually looks at adjacent colors that the colors have to be touching, the pixels have to be touching. It doesn't work that way for extrusion. What it's doing is whatever number you are clicking on, all instances of that number will be changed. So even though there's spaces around this and this, if I click on a number 1 with another color, with another extrusion, let's try 3, and I'm using the paint can, you'll see they will all change. So I just wanted to call that out. You might want that, you might not, but that's how the fill works. So unlike a paint, a color-based fill, it's ignoring the gaps. It's not looking to see what is adjacent. It's simply replacing that number. So again, decide for yourself if you like that feature. But to best of my knowledge, that's how it's worked. I just don't think I called it out in the last video. Okay, so you have your extrusion levels. You can change it with any of these methods. Again, you could change this individually using the pen tool. But what you can now do is in the upper right corner, there are now 3 new tools. So we have generate based on luminosity. So again, those of you who know color theory, please explain this, because when I click on this and I click on apply, what it does is that any one color has the same extrusion, so that makes sense. And other colors also have some of the same extrusion levels. And I would expect that because there's only 8 extrusion levels. So like the gray and the yellow both have a 7. The red is a 4. I believe when I tried dark blue, it was also a 4. Green is 5. So if you folks know what that relates to, again, please leave it in the comments. I'll certainly give you a shout out if I do any follow-up videos. And so that is the first option. So that is generate based on luminosity. Next one is generate based on color index. And again, we apply that, and now you see some different numbers, like the gray is now an 8, the red is now an 8, the yellow is 5. I thought what it related to was row here, because there are 8 rows and 8 there's 8 rows and 8 extrusion levels, but it doesn't seem to, because the gray is the bottom And yet, well, the gray is 8, but the red is also 8, and the red is up here. So if that's how the way it was working, then red would only be a 5, not an 8. So my apologies, don't know what color indexing refers to, and I'm not really trying to complain too much about the developers, but I couldn't find any documentation on it other than saying that it exists. It didn't say how it works. And then the third one is the tooltip is wrong. It says generate based on color index as well. This one, I presume, should say generate based on noise, which the patch notes mention. So this is noise, and that looking at the icon, it does look like it's kind of this hash. So it does look like that it is meant to be noise. Now, whereas these seem to be consistent, like if I was to keep toggling back and forth between these, you would get the same result. Not the case with noise. So basically, it's not saying that you define the noise and then it'll make it based on the noise. It's saying it's just going to randomize. So if you click on it, again, you get the notification, and that's what you get. So just to prove, so 4274, we'll change this, and then we'll go back. You can see it's not 4274 anymore. Now it's 4673. So this is basically just randomization. So it sounds a little bit fancier than it really is, which is fine. But this is basically a randomized extrusion. I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason to it. It certainly could be useful. Maybe you're trying to make like an uneven terrain. Maybe you're trying to make plants and you don't feel like drawing out individual leaves. There's a lot of reasons why you would use that. So those are the three main additions made to the extrusion functionality. We already talked about the 64 by 64 project. The rest I'm just going to go through really quickly. I already mentioned the F1 through F4 keys. You have a few options more for exporting. So when you come to the export stage, you can export as a PNG. It says, I guess you couldn't do that before. I never really would have thought to use this for exporting, because if you're going to do that, I would think you would just use a more, what's the word I'm looking for, a more robust paint program. You probably wouldn't use this, but that's just my opinion. They said they did this based on feedback, so I guess some people wanted to be able to export as PNG, so who am I to second guess? That option is there for you now. Add scaling option when exporting as a model, so you choose model. This is new. I guess this wasn't here before. I actually don't use this tool that often other than to review it for you guys, which we'll get to in just a minute. Okay, so added size option when rendering a GIF. So go to image, GIF. So you have, excuse me, size option here, not frame rate. Added frame rate, so that's new too. Added panning, so arrow WASD. So I believe if we go back to drawing, then you can just pan around. So obviously for a small image like this, don't need it, but it is there. Panning reset. So now that you can pan, you also can do a pan reset. I can't hit it though because that uses the home key, and the home key is actually how to pause on OBS. At least that's the hotkey that I used. Because I very rarely was using the home key when I was doing a tutorial. So unfortunately, I cannot hit the home key. It will pause the video. And it says it updated to the latest version of Unity. So this must now be built, I guess, on version 2021.1, I believe, is the newest version. It's hard to tell what's considered production because they kind of have this sliding scale. Like like when they get to the end of the year, they'll, I believe, do what I think is called an LTS version. So it's the long-term support version. If I recall, that's what it stands for. And that that might be the version they're referring to. So they might be reversion to LTS for 2020. So that's about it. It says they fixed an issue when importing DAE in Blender. My apologies. I only have a very passing knowledge of Blender. I had considered covering it for the channel, but the bottom line is I am not an artist, and there's a gazillion people out there who do it so much better. So if you need Blender tutorials, there's plenty of them out there. Me doing it would be an utter waste of your time because there's so many people who really know what they're doing. So I think that's about it. So the only thing I really want to mention about this, again, I try to be very positive, particularly because this is so inexpensive. If I recall, I believe it's only $3.99 USD, so roughly $4 USD on itch.io, and I think they're also on the Unity store. Um, but even though they're very inexpensive, I don't see it as a serious tool yet. I know they're trying to position it as a tool, but I think this is more of a hobby object. This might be an application maybe for younger people who are interested in 3D, and this helps bridge the gap between them. They can draw a 2D image, and then without having to do anything crazy, it automatically turns it into a 3D object. So I definitely think there's a niche for this. I just don't really see it as a professional application yet. That's just my opinion. Certainly, you can draw your own conclusions, but that's where I position this at the moment. I see it more as kind of a niche, more as a novelty, again, for people who enjoy 2D and are trying to make a quick jump to 3D. So it could be a good gateway, so to speak, that it could get them into more full-fledged 3D, but even that means it's a transitionary product. It's not like the final production tool that you're going to use. Again, your mileage may vary. That is just my opinion. Um, but yeah, that should about do it. So if there's anything else that you want to see, let me know. Now that I'm digging into it, I might go into since they do the animated GIF, I might do an example of that. So that might be interesting. But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward as how to turn the 2D image into a 3D object. So I hope you found this useful. Again, if there's anything else you want to see, please leave a comment. Please considering leaving a like and subscribing. Something like 95% of the views on this channel come from non-subscribers. Okay, so that should about do it. Please enjoy the rest of your day.